Okay guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing chapter 10 in this particular video. We're not going to get into 11 because we're coordinating with the Dela Cruz family to get the videos done, and there's just a lot of material and we don't want to overwhelm. And now that we're all stuck at home with our families indefinitely, there's plenty of time to watch videos and to implement.
Yep.
But before we get into this, I really want to encourage you that if you have not yet taught the biblical if you haven't yet taught biblical obedience to your kids, you really need to do that. If you don't have biblical obedience as a foundation, it's going to be very difficult to get anywhere else with them. And obedience is very important to God. I'm not going to take the time to go into that now, but you can just do a word study on obedience even in the New Testament alone, and you'll realize the importance of obedience to God and how if you don't teach that to your children, you really are giving them a more challenging Christian experience in their later life. So please take the time to do that. Call us or email us with questions,
Yep.
And then when you're ready, proceed with this particular lesson. The next two lessons may seem overly practical to some, or they may seem great to others. This particular series of lessons really ministered to me because it's just the way my brain works. I like seeing flow charts. I like being able to have my children sit while I go look at the chart and see, okay, was this a foolish behavior? Was this a childish behavior? That really helped me out, whereas Tammy had a different experience initially, which she's going to share.
Yeah, I think in the beginning I felt overwhelmed. I just wanted a quick answer. Just tell me what to do when my kid does this. And I learned that we need discernment, and that it requires prayer, and it also requires thinking on my part. I didn't want to do all that. I just want a quick answer because I'm really busy and I don't have time to go look at a chart. But I realized the wisdom over time was I needed to have the self-control, stop and think, pray for wisdom and discernment, and use the chart. I used it. You don't have to use it. It's a tool. But it did help me eventually to stop and think things through. But in the beginning, I was overwhelmed. So if any of you feel like me when you first see that and think, oh my goodness, I got to learn all this, you don't have to. We actually have a chart we'll give you in a couple weeks that lays it out for you. And if you choose to use it, I think it will become very helpful of what to do, when to discipline, and how to handle situations.
Okay, so today we're going to hop into two areas to discipline your child in, and those are skills and behaviors. We've mentioned this in class before. In fact, we mentioned this before we had to start meeting via video, but I just want to remind you that the word discipline is an equivalent word to training. Discipline doesn't mean punish.
Right.
Discipline means to train. Okay, now there is also the word correction in the Bible. And correction does not always refer to sin. Correction simply means something was done incorrectly and it needed to be corrected. That can be both non-moral and moral. So that's just a quick summary of what you're going to see in this flow chart as we work our way through it. But today we're going to start with discipline. So, two ways to discipline with encouragement when developing skills. The first is verbal praise. Link unexpected praise and encouragement to the cause and effect of a child's efforts. Also, focus on the privilege they've been given and their character and the end result.
Versus the end result.
Versus the end result, yeah.
Yeah. For example, if your child gets an A, we really want to praise them more for their hard work and the effort they put in than getting the A, because getting an A is not the ultimate goal here. It's more what kind of character was in them to get the A. Now some just have natural talent, and that's different. Then you can praise them for using their God-given talent and doing well. But I think you get my point. Here's a couple other examples. You can say things like, I was impressed with how hard you worked, even to the end of the game. So our kids play soccer, two of them, so we'll use a lot of soccer examples. Instead of just focusing on the fact that maybe they made a goal, I would say something more like, wow, you were a real team player. You just worked really hard, even though it was hot out and you got tired. Because those are really the qualities of the skill that I'm more impressed or more encouraged by. You could also say something like, great job completing your math page. Those problems were very challenging. So again, those are just a couple examples of highlighting what's really most important. It's not the grade and it's not the end result of a game.
Okay, so again, just to reiterate, we're talking about dealing with a child's skills. And in fact, let me go back and define that really quickly. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. The skills are referring to talents and gifts and skills you're trying to develop, such as math or sports or camping or hunting or cooking. Those are all skills you're trying to develop that in and of themselves they are not moral. And so when you're trying to develop those skills in your child, you want to make sure you're using verbal praise. And we all know how effective verbal praise is. It's very meaningful to each of us. If our boss takes notice of something we do and uses encouraging and life-giving words, even if they don't know that that's what they're doing. The fact is, when we're noticed and given verbal encouragement, it makes a big deal and it incentivizes our heart.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you always find something to praise your kids about in the area of skill, because even if they're not strong at something, God still made them that way, and there's something really good within them that, well, not within them, but that they're choosing to do with that skill. So it's just important that you find even the little things. Sometimes you might have a child and you aren't seeing a lot of effort. Maybe they struggle with laziness. And so it's easy to get discouraged and really hold back from verbal praise. But pray God will reveal to you areas where you can give that to them. Remember, kids take praise a lot better than always just receiving correction. So we want to increase that a lot.
Excellent. Okay, the next is goal incentives. These are used to motivate actions associated with skills, talents, and natural physical attributes. We want to use them sparingly, and these are used more when children are young, and particularly under the age of 5, because they're not yet able to be motivated morally. You want to come up with a goal for an area that you want your child to grow in, but use goal incentives only in the beginning until they understand why it's morally correct to develop that particular skill.
Okay, so for example, when our daughters were all sucking their thumbs and they turned the age of 3, we wanted to teach them the skill of no longer sucking their thumb to comfort themselves, but to come up with other ways. And so we chose to make them a chart. And we told them every day that they went 24 hours without sucking their thumb, they got to put a sticker on the chart. So that was a goal incentive. And then not only did we allow them to do that, we went to the store with them before we even started this process. We went to the store, we let them pick out one of their favorite toys, and we bought it for them, but we said, you need to earn this toy by having the self-control to no longer suck your thumb, because this is for big children. And so we sat the toy on the fireplace, and we sat the chart close by. And every day, and for some kids it took a little longer, they started sucking their thumb. And of course in the beginning we might give them a reminder, and if they quickly pulled it out, then that would be okay. But if they were constantly fighting us, or we would find them sucking their thumb without us knowing intentionally, then we would obviously have them start over and not get a sticker for that day. But they had to go for 7 days. But the point was, the skill was learning how to comfort yourself without sucking your thumb and having that self-control. And so that was why we gave a toy. They weren't morally capable of understanding the benefits of not sucking their thumb. It was something they had done for their whole life, and they really enjoyed it. So the incentive was more the toy at that time. Okay. Oh, another example too is potty training. Obviously, we used every time they would go to the restroom or have a dry diaper or dry pull-ups, I guess. They might get an M&M or whatever you choose to use. I do want to caution you on not using food always as a reward. We tried to use more charts, or maybe going to the store and buying a small toy, very small, or maybe sugarless gum. But you got to be careful on food. It can become a problem when you're an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've used this example before in our Q&A the other night, but for those of you that missed it, here is a good example of this. When Emily was 5, we put her in rec soccer, and she had absolutely no interest in playing soccer whatsoever, but we wanted her to play a team sport. She is not motivated by sports, and so as all the group of children would go to one end following the ball, Emily would be at the other end of the field having a very excited conversation with her imaginary friend. And so we thought, well, let's see if we can incentivize her, and we basically told her every time she touched the ball during the game, she would earn $1, and then we could spend that afterwards. I don't think we spent a single dollar. That didn't do anything for her. But not long after, it turned into an attitude instead of just being a skill. And as soon as that happened, then we stopped all goal incentives because now it had moved from an issue of just trying to incentivize learning a skill to an issue of behavior and morality, and we'll get to that next week.
Well, we're going to touch a little bit on it here. So do you want to do the video first? You can cut off.
Yeah, so let me just say this. When you begin limiting rewards, then you reveal their true motivation. So it is important not to always use rewards, and it's important that when you start limiting them, you'll start to see what their motivation is.
Which is good.
Yeah, which is excellent. So now we're going to show a video by the Dela Cruz, which is going to wrap this up, and then we'll move on to the next segment.
Okay, now Elizabeth, remember, we need to do this all by yourself. We're going to get you your own bike with that pink basket you asked about. You ready? Okay, here we go. I'll turn this way. Good job. Good job. All right.
Okay, so our next section here is just to describe that most skill development ultimately becomes moral. Okay, and if you want some biblical justification for that, just take some time and read Matthew 25:14 through 30 and look at how the talents and skills that God gives people, what expectation He has for those, and what punishment ensues when people squander them. So we do want to be training our children that with the mindset that the skills, talents, natural abilities that God has either given them or provided access to do become moral, and they do make a difference in the world around us. I think it's Mark chapter 7, where Jesus has performed many miracles, and the people definitely take note of the miracle, or of the miracles, but the other thing they take note of is it says the people were overwhelmed with amazement and said, "He does everything well." And that's what we want to be. That's what we want the Repair House to be, and that's what we want your houses to be. That we're not impressing the world in order to pat ourselves on the back, but that we are doing things excellently because we are representing God and we're representing His virtue. And so skills do become moral over time, and we definitely want to make that transition with our children as they age.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of not offering rewards is, like Dave said, it reveals what's in their heart. And you get an opportunity to really teach them about failure and what to do when they fail. All kids, when they're young, when they start to fail at something, they just want to quit. And you'll see in each of your children how they respond to failure. And we're talking about areas they naturally aren't good at. That is good for them to experience this, by the way. Don't try to spare your children from failure. They need to experience so that you can disciple them how to overcome failure. And so, for example, juggling a soccer ball when my kids were young, that was very frustrating. If any of you know you've ever tried, I can't do it at all. But it takes a lot of practice, and it actually takes years. And I remember one daughter would start crying every day. We would go out and we would just juggle for 5 minutes. They were in soccer, so they needed to, that was their homework from their coach. So we'd work on it, but every time she would just cry. And so I talked with her about it. I did not give her a reward at this point because I thought, this is revealing that when she starts to fail at something, she just wants to get depressed. And I want to train that out of her. So what we did is I would prepare before we'd start the skill that your temptation is when you can't do something well, you start to get frustrated and you want to quit and you want to cry. There's nothing wrong with crying. But what I want to do is I want to pray with you right now. And I want to encourage you that we're just going to practice for and you can even lessen the time because you want to kind of end the time before the meltdown comes. So you could choose to do it less. I did it for 5 minutes, but if that was even hard, you could cut it back to 2.5 minutes and bump up a minute every day. But the point is to teach the kid that when they start to get frustrated, what can they do instead of quit? And so I would talk to them about when you start to get frustrated, there's a couple things. And one thing that can help you is what do you do as an adult? And that's what I taught my kids. I said it's important to take captive your thoughts. You're not a failure. You're not a loser. Because the kids will say these things like, I'm never going to do it. They say these absolutes, and those were lies from Satan. And I wanted to teach them very young, no, you can do it. You have to tell yourself, you need to take captive that negative thought and you need to fill it with something positive like, okay, this is really hard. I'm really sad. Those are the truth, right? This is hard. I'm sad. I feel angry. You can say those things, they're truth, but don't say things that are not true or lies. And then also replace it with something good, like, okay, I can't do it today, but I'm going to keep working a little bit every day, and eventually I'll get it. And I would make them copy me with positive words. I had another daughter that she wouldn't cry, she would get angry, and maybe she would throw the ball, or she'd go hit something. So again, every kid is different. So with her, I had to teach her self-control with her body, that when she starts to experience failure, that's not a time to be angry. You can express that you feel angry, but you can't go act out on your anger. I had another daughter that would go and hide. I'm serious. She would just disappear. That's how she dealt with failure, and that is her character still to this day. Typically, if something starts to become hard, if she doesn't take captive her thoughts, she will just want to avoid the problem and hide from it. So everybody's different.
Yep.
So the important thing was, I said, number one, taking captive your thoughts. Number two, I taught them to be open. And again, I taught them to be open about what was true, the feelings they were feeling, but I had to teach them that there's true feelings and there's lies. And then the last thing is, again, not to resort to sinful behavior as a result of that failure. So that's why not always giving goals, incentives, is really a good thing when it comes to skill or school or anything, because we really want to take it as an opportunity to train them, to train the heart.
Absolutely. Okay.
We'll talk more about this, by the way, with school
Yeah.
and other privileges you get, because we still haven't had our big talk on worldview, which I'm excited about.
Yeah. Yep.
But we don't have time yet.
Okay, so now let's talk about behaviors. So we've talked about skills, now we're going to talk about behaviors. And here's the difference. We already talked about what skills are. Behaviors are requirements of the heart. Okay, so obedience, it's a requirement of our heart. Self-control, gratitude, compassion, love in action, verbalizing your feelings, etc., right? The fruits of the Spirit, there's so many things that are expectations on our hearts. Those are behaviors. Those are very different than skills. And we don't want to motivate behaviors with goal incentives. So what we do want to do is motivate behavior by encouragement and correction. So let's start with encouragement. Encourage with justified praise. The absence of encouragement is discouragement. Okay?
I already shared it. We already shared a lot on that at the beginning of the discussion.
Yeah. But there's two ways to discipline with encouragement. And remember, discipline means to train. Okay? One is pre-activity. Encouragement comes verbally before a required behavior is expected. Use virtuous words when encouraging. So, two ways to encourage during pre-activity training. One of those is a verbal reminder. This provides the child before an activity with what we expect and the reason we expect it. Do this often when first training a habit of behavior. For a teen, we're going to use dialogue questions. We'll get to that in just a second. But we're going to show you a video by the Dela Cruzes again to explain this particular process.
Now remember, Mrs. Bonner is coming over any minute. She's coming over for coffee. I want you to remember to greet her when you see her and use your best manners when you talk to her. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, so now we're going to move into dialogue questions. That is where you ask the child what's required of them. This allows the child an opportunity to take ownership of their behavior by hearing themselves verbalize the rules of conduct and to receive praise for correct answers.
It's also important to talk about it to make sure that they remember and that you both agree with what the standard is, because often what we think they understand, we might be wrong. And so it really reveals what they remember from your training time and non-conflict or your family devotional when you ask that question right before an activity.
Okay, and so remember, these are pre-activity encouragement. So in this particular example, someone is coming over to your house, an adult, and you are going to use dialogue questions to encourage a right behavior. One thing you could say is, okay, what do we do when an adult visitor comes to our house? And then you wait for them to answer. And that both reminds them, it allows them to take ownership, and prepares them for that particular event.
Yeah, the interrupt rule. You know, when you have guests coming over, you might want to remind them the expectations, what to do at the dinner table when dinner's over, and you know what the any expectations you have. It's just good to review. You don't have to go over all of them, but go over the most recent ones you've been training, or the ones where you've seen maybe the kids forgetting. And then when you have a kid that is 5 years to 12 years, it's important to not only ask them how to obey or what's expected of them, but ask them why, because that really reveals, again, what they really learned from our training times. Sometimes we teach a behavior under the age of 5, but at the age of 5 and up, we need to start teaching them why. It's not good enough anymore that they know how to behave. They have to understand why, so they're morally motivated, and also so they can apply that moral conviction in other areas. So I would often ask my kids when they were between the 5 and 12-year-old age, I'd ask them the dialogue question of, you know, what are we going to do when the adults show up to our house, and why is that important? And I would let them answer. I never tell them anymore.
Once they've been trained.
Yeah, once they've been trained, obviously. If they haven't been trained, then you want to do that in non-conflict at another time.
Correct.
And for teenagers, I only do that if it's an area of weakness in their life, or if it's a new habit. So say phones now are so common, and phones are such a temptation for the kids to get sucked into them, and it's really important we have proper etiquette with phones with our guests, or even with one another. So it is good to review these, and I think it's important with a teen, you know, be careful, don't have a belittling question and humiliate them, but just ask them things like, you know, I know you've struggled before in the past with your phone and being on it when guests are here. What do you remember why it's important not to be on the phone when we have guests here? And just talk to them about it. Don't be negative and don't be sarcastic. And if your teen is annoyed with your question, it's good to draw them out about why. Maybe you're babying them too much. Maybe you're reminding them too much and you're robbing them of doing it right. So be careful. It's easy to just remind and remind and remind. And so if our kids are annoyed and they show that to us, obviously we want to deal with, there's a more beautiful way they could have expressed themselves to us. They could have told us, hey Mom, I'm feeling like you're reminding me a lot and it hurts my feelings. That would be the appropriate way. But sometimes they get emotional and they respond disrespectful. And so we want to find out why. And then we want to ask them, could you work on telling me that the right way? So just be careful with teenagers that you're also treating them with respect. They are older and they're not little kids.
Excellent. Okay, so here's another video by the Dela Cruzes. It will highlight dialogue questions.
All right. Okay, wait. Before you get in your seats, I want to know who can tell me the rules for the grocery store.
Just stay close to you or stay close to the cart.
Very good. Stay close to me or stay close to the cart. Very good. You know one?
Does not ask for a toy at the store if you see one that you like, and stay close to you at the store
That's
and not run away.
good. Do we touch anything?
No.
No. All right, go ahead. Get in your seats. Good job. Thank you.
Okay, so now the third category is positive words. Now we did a whole lesson on speaking life and life-giving words, and so if you need a refresher on that, you can go back and watch that video or read those notes. Nonetheless, we want to use positive words with our children. We need to retrain ourselves to communicate because we tend in our society to communicate negatively. For example, we'll say, hey, don't spill that, instead of, hey, see if you can get it across the room without spilling. Or how carefully can you carry that today?
Yeah.
So again, it's retraining, and here comes another video to give a very brief explanation of what this looks like.
Okay, here, take this to the table. Don't spill it. Okay, take this to the table, please. And let's see how careful you can be.
Okay, so just to recap the pre-activity encouragements, one is a verbal reminder, another is dialogue questions, and do them all with using positive and life-giving words. That really did become a habit for us. It took a while, but it became a habit for us where wherever we went, whatever we did, if someone was coming to our house, it just became a habit to communicate with our children this way so that they were prepared and could be successful.
Yeah, and I think this is also what led us to start preparing our kids just to pray and depend on God. So before every soccer practice, still to this day, and I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old I'm taking, or 14-year-old, whoops, almost 15, to soccer, we still pray on the way to soccer.
Every practice, every game.
Practice and every game. And we do it for a couple reasons. One is I always want them to remember that going there and going to a practice or to a game is a privilege, that it was a gift God gave them to serve Him, and that we go to give to others, that we're not going, I don't say any of these negative words, but we're not going there for them. We don't need them to become big soccer stars. That's not why we got into soccer. We got into it to develop their God-given gifts and to be able to reach out ultimately and to be a light, to be an example to the world. And so we pray. And so I think we first learned, this pre-activity training, and now it transferred to we always pray and depend on God before everything. We pray often before church. We prayed before we started this video today, Dave and I. So we do it as well. So it's a really beautiful habit to get in.
Yeah, it's a beautiful habit, and it's also preparing them for their relationship with God, because isn't this what you want them to have as habits before they go do anything in life as adult disciples? And they do this, like Tammy said, through prayer. So now the activity has occurred. It's now post-activity time. And so we want to encourage them to reinforce their behavior after the fact. And there's two ways to encourage behavior. One is through affirmation. So we're going to try to affirm both small and big things. We're going to use physical touch. Think about the following Proverbs. Proverbs 15:23 in the second part of the verse says, "How good is a timely word." And Proverbs 25:11 says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. I assume that's a reference to beautiful jewelry. I don't know. But nonetheless, you can understand what they're trying to say. Go ahead, Tammy.
Okay. I just want to add that it's really important that you focus on this. It's really easy to just hone in on everything your kid is doing wrong. That comes very natural to us as parents. And if you're struggling with being positive or saying encouraging words, pray about it. Get advice. Maybe there's a bitter root towards that child in your heart. Maybe you need to forgive them, or you're just annoyed and frustrated. But it's really important that you take it serious, that your affirming words are just as important as your correcting words. And that's why we do this first. We want to get you in the habit of constantly giving them affirming words. Also, we talked about flattery, and we want to make sure that we're not being deceitful and saying things that aren't true because we're trying to encourage them. We want to say things that are actually true, and again, pray about it, get advice, life-giving, not deceitful words.
Excellent. Okay, so here's a video from the Dela Cruzes on post-activity affirmation.
Hi, I'm so glad you're able to come. We'll talk to you later. Okay, bye-bye, thanks. Girls, thank you so much for watching the Littles and letting me have coffee with Mrs. Bonner. It was so nice. And Elizabeth, you did so good with your manners. Mrs. Bonner told me she was so encouraged. Thank you.
Okay, lastly today is the concept of rewards. Unexpected rewards to reinforce behavior. I really want to emphasize that. They are unexpected. They must be done after the behavior, because if they're not, then it's a bribe. And if you want to reference Ezekiel 23:8 regarding bribes, you're welcome to do that. Clearly the Bible speaks against bribes.
Yes.
So on your way to the grocery store, to say, if you will be quiet today in the grocery store, I'll buy you a candy bar. That's a bribe. You have made the child's behavior a reward dependent on their behavior. So you don't want to do that. On the other hand, let's say that you've been working with your child on being calm and quiet and self-controlled in the grocery store, and this week you go to the grocery store and your child is just great. They just do a really good job. You're very proud of them. Well, afterwards you would definitely want to use affirmation. You would want to tell them how much that honored you and how much it honored the people around you.
Yes.
And you want to use life-giving words. But it's possible that you might also say, I'm just so happy and so proud, I think we should both go get an ice cream. Right? Now, you've not bribed the child, because the child had no idea when they were exhibiting that behavior that it was going to result in that kind of a reward. But those kind of rewards make an impression. You don't want to do them often, because
No.
if you do them often, then the child is smart and the child will quickly learn, I wonder what's in it for me today. So they don't want to be often, but to do them from time to time is a very powerful way to affirm a behavior and to emphasize that and to encourage it to happen in the future.
I also want to remind you that this is just like us as Christians. We don't always get a reward for doing what's right. We do what's right because we want to please God, and we also know the preciousness of others, and we also know we want to treat others the way we want to be treated. Now, our young children aren't going to be motivated by pleasing God. They're not going to be motivated by the preciousness of others right away, but they will be motivated by treating others the way they want to be treated. So try to always put it in their perspective at the age they're at, so that they can start to become morally motivated. And so that's why, again, we want to limit the rewards. Just do them occasionally when you really want to celebrate with them that they've overcome an area of weakness or you've seen great improvement.
Excellent. Okay, so here's our final video from the Dela Cruz family.
You guys did so good at the store today. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for obeying. I bought special treats. You guys get to have them after lunch.
Okay.
I hope you guys are enjoying those videos as much as we are, and I really want to express my appreciation to the Dela Cruz family. Those take a lot of time for them to put together, but to us, they're incredibly helpful because a 15-second snippet puts into an image what we are trying to describe here to you, and I think honestly it does it much better than we do.
Yeah. The Ramirez family used the videos for first-time obedience when they were training their son. And they said it really helped him to understand by seeing good examples and bad examples. So feel free to use these videos to show your child what you're trying to do.
Okay, so next video lesson is going to be the beginning of correction. And so if you haven't yet trained biblical obedience, do that this week, and please send us an email and let us know how that training time went. If you have done that, then begin incorporating these pre- and post-activity encouragements into your life and into your words. And then the next video that comes out will be on correction. And we're looking forward to getting into that. So thank you guys for joining us. Appreciate it. I hope this video is helpful to you.